Okay, we are now streaming to YouTube, so I will hand the meeting off to Bill.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting of the East Franklinton Review Board to order. Belkis, call the roll, please.
Yes. Dr. Boss?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Fergus?
Here.
Mr. Manfred?
Present.
Mr. Overly? Okay. Mr. Szymanski?
Present.
And Mr. Way?
Present.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from our last meeting. And if so, are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I'd entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Way.
Thank you.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Okay. Dr. Boss?
Approve.
Mr. Fergus?
Approve.
Mr. Manfred?
Approve.
Mr. Szymanski?
Approve.
And Mr. Way?
Approve.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moving on. Old business applications for certificate of approval. Our first application is EF 1812-003, address 79-8385 McDowell Street. The property owner is the City of Columbus, and the applicant is Homeport and Columbus Design LLC. Belkis, staff report, please.
Yes. So the Columbus Housing Partnership, or Homeport, is proposing to construct a 4-story multifamily development at the corner of State and McDowell Streets within the West Broad Street subdistrict. The units will be intended for families earning 80% of the area median income or below, and the project is anticipated to be submitted to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency to receive a special allocation of tax credits as a part of the Fact 50 program. The development includes a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units for a total of 50 units and a total of 64 parking spaces, 4 on-site spaces, and 60 within the Gravity 2 parking garage. The project is being developed in conjunction with the approved Gravity 2 development and will utilize the parking and provided site amenities. In February 2019, the board approved the demolition of the site's existing church on the following conditions, and that's that tax credits or other public financing be awarded to the project for construction of multifamily housing to provide affordable housing. 2, documentation of the structure to be coordinated with the Historic Preservation Office. And 3, board review and approval of the elevations, materials, landscaping, and lighting. And then also in February of 2019, the board approved the construction of the new multifamily apartment building on the following conditions, and that's board review and approval of the elevations, materials, landscaping, and lighting, and also to provide 60 parking spaces through a shared parking arrangement. So today, the applicant is requesting approval for the elevations, materials, lighting, and landscaping of the proposed building. The applicant will return to the board at a later date for the approval of the graphics. So at the June 2020 meeting, the board provided the following feedback for the applicant and for the elevation, and that's that the brick material on the east elevation be limited to the 2 end caps and for the first or second story of the middle section of the building, that the entrance and community spaces be oriented near the corner of State and McDowell Streets, and for there to be less wall space on the east and south elevations, potentially through increasing the window size or adding more windows, and to bring the darker panel material further down the center portion of the east elevation. So in response to the board's feedback, the applicant has updated the east elevation by bringing down the fiber cement siding along the center portion and reduced the amount of brick material and increase the number of and size of the windows on all elevations, and oriented the main entrance, covered terrace, and community space to the corner of McDowell and State Streets. And the submittal includes a site plan, elevation, rendering, floor plans, and photos of the existing site. So Jacqueline, if you could go to their drawings, please. And then we'll go ahead and start with the, yeah, so here, oh, if you go to the first page. Yeah, so here, this is the corner of State and McDowell. So you'll see that corner now includes the covered terrace, and that'll house the main entrance as well. And then if you run your eye to the right, that's going along McDowell Street, you'll see how the brick was maintained on the two end pieces, but how that darker panel has come down on the side in the middle. And then if you can go to the next page. So here you just have the different floor plans. Next page. And then here is the site plan. Next page. Here you have the landscaping plan. So you'll see the trees and the shrubbery there. Next page. So this is the site as it looks today. Next page. Okay, so here we have the east and south elevations. So again, you'll see, how the materiality was updated. You'll also see how the windows were updated along these elevations as well, with regards to the space that they take up, their sizing, and the number of windows. And then you'll also see how that entrance and the community space shifted to the corner there. And then if you could go to the next page. And so here are the west and north elevation. So if you go back to that first page, Jacqueline. So after staff review, the proposal is consistent with the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan, and staff does recommend approval. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Belkis. Any questions for Belkis? Hearing none, who do we have representing the applicant here? Anyone?
Yes, we're here. Sorry about that.
Cheryl with Columbus Design Company.
Okay, can you would each state your name, please, for the record?
So I'm Leah Evans with Homeport.
And?
I'm Carrick Cheryl with Columbus Design Company.
Okay, and I'm going to administer an oath now. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Yes.
Okay, floor is yours. Go ahead.
So I'm going to pass it to Carrick just to recap where we are on our timing of delivery of this building. We appreciate this opportunity to talk more about how the building will actually become a part of the community and the neighborhood. We're hopeful that after this, we'll dig in and continue our work on the plans for the building. We will be finalizing and moving forward with those plans through the rest of the summer, submitting documentation to the Ohio Housing Finance Agency probably sometime in September. And we will look to be able to actually start on this project next spring. So there'll again be some time before you start to see activity on the site, but just wanted to share that development timeline and again, welcome any questions you have about our plans for the development of the site. And Carrick, you can talk through what's changed since last month.
Well, Belkis actually did a great job of explaining the changes between last month and this month. I think that one of the primary concerns that I heard the last time that we got together was the transparency and the perceived activity at the corner of State and McDowell. And so we addressed that by shifting the program spaces around a little bit in order to have the community space and the entrance to the building a little bit, or closer to the corner with a community space right on the corner to be able to have that activity. I think that really actually helps also the potential for community engagement in that community space because it allows for some direct access for a different, potential activities without accessing the other parts of the building. We've increased the window sizes. Primarily, the style of the building has stayed the same. I feel that similar to last month that it's finding a middle ground between what's existing in Franklinton around this area and in what's coming up with the Gravity 2 project in the juxtaposition of the styles of the existing, warehouses and, low-rise masonry residential buildings, and, then obviously the more modern designs of the Gravity projects. I believe other than that, that's about all I have.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicant? Discussion?
This is Kim Way. I have a question, comment and question. May I proceed? So I great improvements in the project. I think the changes that you've made have really helped out a lot. I just have one small comment about the landscape. And you've created now this great urban corner, and you just mentioned about what community can come together. I would really prefer to see that corner basically thought of as like a plaza. So I would not put any landscape there. I would let the building come down and either be sidewalk material or some special, maybe there's some special paving there that's different than the sidewalk, so that people could actually walk up to the railing and say hello to somebody or talk to them. I think the landscape kind of is a little bit of a, like, you got to stay away. So this is I keep mentioning this in most of our meetings, that corner to me is a very important corner in East Franklinton, and it needs to be an urban corner. And I think the landscape makes it look a little bit more suburban and residential. So I would advocate in this case of removing some landscape, which is really unlike most comments that I have. And the other board members can chime into that, but that's just my reaction. I love that space that you've created there, and the railing celebrates it, and I think the landscape is not helping it. I think that needs to be a paved space. Carrick, this is TJ. I have a question for you to follow up on Kim's point. It looks like obviously you've got 3 steps up to the community space. So there's an elevation or grade change there between that floor and the sidewalk. And it also looks like you don't have the same amount of space on the east side as you do on the south side. But would it be, I think to Kim's point, would it be possible to make that stair, instead of it being a 3 or 4 foot wide staircase, bring those stairs all the way across? I guess my question is, are those 4 separate doors all out to that plaza area? And would you possibly be open to enlarging the plaza to come all the way out to the sidewalk and have the railings kind of on the sidewalk and enlarge that plaza to make it feel like you're standing right on the corner of the block? Is that something that would be, Kim, kind of to your point? Yeah, that would be a way to deal with it. It could also just be if you had like a very wide sill all the way around it that connected stair to stair, and treat it as like a bench, like it could be a concrete bench. And so if you could come up and sit on that corner, I think that would be another way to do it.
This is Ryan, and the one question that I'll add, Carrick, and you're going to be much smarter on this than I mean, but I just because I've been hit with this many times from an ADA accessibility and such with 2 sets of stairs, and now we move that common area to the corner. Do you have to provide ADA accessibility, and does that affect with those grade changes? Would be my question for you.
So yeah, let me respond to a lot of those questions and comments. So, and they all really do a very good job of tying into each other. So the floor plate of the the community room, which is at the corner, is about 2 feet above grade. So, and unfortunately, it needs to be that way because I need to have accessibility for the whole building. So if you'll notice, if you go to sheet A21 and look at the rendering, the entrance rendering, you'll see there that you enter the building into the lobby at grade with no stairs. So I've really been trying to do a balancing act between accessibility to the building and not only on this side, but as well as the parking side of the building. And then getting folks up in an elevator, the 24 inches from what I'm calling the lobby level basically to the first floor level, which is 2 feet up. So all of that long story leads to the answers to some of the questions that the community space floor level, it can't really spill out into the sidewalk at the same level. There'd still be some kind of wall. Now, whether that becomes a seat wall or whether that's softened by the landscape that I'm showing, I think that's certainly open for discussion. The developer owner might have some thoughts about whether they want to encourage people to sit on their building. So the landscaping might either deter that or encourage it. But I'll certainly defer to the commission and the owner's thoughts on how to address the grade level change there. Did that answer all the questions?
I guess my last one, I'm looking at sheet, I guess A01, but there's a couple of those, I believe. The site, basically the site plan. And you have the property line as not being far off of that patio. So you're showing in your rendering and on the site plan grass to the sidewalk. Is that, I guess that might be what's misleading to us. Is that going to be grass and hedge, or is that going to just be 8-foot sidewalk, which is the more city standard moving forward, or is your property line basically is shown as coming right to the bottom of that bottom stair, correct?
Yeah. Oh, you're absolutely right. And I honestly don't know if I have an answer to that question. I think the city engineering staff will determine the width of that sidewalk. That sidewalk, in my observation of the site, is fairly new with the curb ramps and everything. So our building appears to be far enough away from it that we could leave it during construction without disturbing it, which would, be our preference, to help control the cost of construction.
I'm not advocating
so
that any of that change either.
Yeah. So I think it's certainly a discussion to be had with city staff about what occurs between the property line of our building and the back of the sidewalk there. But
I guess what I was
city.
getting at is if that sidewalk ends up going all the way to the property line, as most of those sidewalks do down there, although state may be slightly different, that would inherently, Kim, feel like that patio is all the way out on the property line, and people could be standing at that patio and they'd be leaning over the sidewalk.
Yeah, I'm just reacting to
That
what
would
I'm
be
seeing.
correct.
Right. That was why I'm not sure if that's accurate and what will be reflected when it's built.
Well, we're approving something today, so the drawings in front of us are what we're approving, unless somebody tells me different. So I just want to state that, my opinion on that.
And Kim, you may know more on this from your experience on that, but once again, from my, I'm not arguing against the stairs, but the city has always had issues of putting stairs in right away. And with what TJ brings up of that being right on the property line, taking additional stairs from where the current wall is to get them the little patio might be a difficult thing to achieve without shifting the building.
Yeah, I wasn't advocating for that. That was TJ's suggestion. I'd be fine if it was just sidewalk right up to the wall of the building.
Well, we can certainly show that on our site plan. I don't think that's an issue to show, basically all plaza between the stairs within the city right of way. We can work through city engineering with that.
Okay.
Dr. Box, did you have a comment?
So I was just noticing that the idea of making the corner of McDowell a sort of gathering place could lead to loitering that might not be quite what's envisioned. Cigarette butts, for example, empty pop cans, drink cups, etc.
I think that's what Carrick was getting at with his comment about the ownership having to make a decision.
But that's just that's a management issue. A property owner would be out there picking up and cleaning up that stuff, I would assume, on a daily basis, if that's what happens. But we want people in East Franklinton, right?
So this is Belkis. I'm just going to quickly interrupt. So what I'm hearing is everyone seems to agree that the updates to the windows and the materiality and shifting the main entrance to near the corner is a welcomed and supported update, but that, the board's generally asking the applicant to explore how, the corner could interact more, be closer to the sidewalk, maybe not a condition, but just to continue to explore that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Carrick, has it gone through a pre-site compliance plan at all, or have you had a pre-meeting for that?
We have not had a preliminary site compliance plan meeting.
I guess I think my only concern would be, I'm happy to approve these changes, but my only concern would be if the site compliance meeting and your site plan changes this corner at all, that maybe Belkis could do a staff approval, or maybe that this corner could just come in front of us for a final approval before building permit.
So this is Belkis again. So typically if changes are made after site compliance, I always review that before approving it. But if the change is different than, the spirit of what the board approved, then I would recommend that I go back in front of the board again. So if it's a huge change, then of course the board will see it again. But if it's like little tweaks or doing something to further accommodate ADA or something like that, but it's still in the spirit of what we're seeing here, then I would just staff approve that.
And Belkis, again, I think if we just say that we're recommending that there be no landscape between the back of curb and the face of building on that corner from stair to stair, access to the building. No matter, doesn't that get to it, whether it's a city requirement or the developer's requirement?
Yeah, and that's a specific enough condition of approval that would be completely fine, and I can review for that when they send me permit drawings, if that's something that the board wants to do. Definitely, yeah.
I'm not sure that it has to come back to the board. That's just my opinion. If that's the outcome, then I'd be happy with you approving the outcome.
I agree.
Okay.
So what we're looking at right now is I'd be looking for a motion to approve with the condition that the landscaping, that there be no landscaping in front of the building on the corner of McDowell and State. Is that what we're looking at?
And would be paved with the same material as the sidewalk.
And then be paved with the same material as the sidewalk. Okay, is that pretty much what we're looking at here?
Stated perfectly, Bill.
Okay, I hereby make that as a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Mr. Wade, second.
Sorry, who motioned?
I did.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'll call the roll. Dr. Bach?
Approve.
Okay, Mr. Fergus?
Approve.
Mr. Manfred?
Approved.
Mr. Szymanski?
Approve.
Okay, and Mr. Way?
Approve.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Moving on. Application
Thank you.
EF 1908-003. Address is 448, 454 West Town Street and 441, 443 West Chapel Street. Property owner is Harper Enterprises, Inc. Applicant is Ryan Keener with Mode Architects, and we are reviewing beer garden change of use and site plan. Staff report, please.
Yes. So the land grant beer garden is located at 448 to 454 West Town Street and 443 West Chapel Street within the Arts and Innovation Subdistrict. A site plan for the beer garden, which is 10,560 square feet, and live entertainment venue use was approved with conditions in June and August of 2019. Today, the applicant is requesting regular approval of their existing site conditions as shown in the provided application materials. So Jacqueline, if you bring up their drawings, please. No, the next one. Yeah. Next. The next.
Well, you guys are really going uphill there.
Okay, so if you start on page 1, Jacqueline, or page 2, sorry. Yeah, so this is the site as it is today. So you'll see that there's some fencing on the outside or the perimeter of the site. Next page. You'll also see here there's seating on the interior of the site. There's some what looks to be Astroturf with lawn games. And then next page. And then you'll also see some string lighting on the site. So that's, if you drove over there today, that's what you would see and what you would interact with. And after staff review, the proposal is generally consistent with the recommendations of the East Franklinton Creative Community District Plan, and staff highlights that the parking reduction is significant, but due to the proposed site plan, including less intense programming such as lawn games, staff is not opposed to the parking reduction, and staff recommends approval. And if approved, the board will grant the following modifications to the East Franklinton District Development Standards, and that's to reduce the number of required parking spaces from 254 to 0 for the beer garden. Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for staff? Which I want to make one clarification here before we get going. If and correct me if I'm wrong, Belkis, but if we grant this application, we will be taking a temporary approval for what currently exists and turn it into a permanent approval for what currently exists. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, just so we're clear on that. Now, any other questions from staff?
Bill, I just want to make a point that Bart Oberly has sent a note that he's on the call now.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, Bart.
I am here, yes.
So noted for the record.
And I just want to add as well, so some options for this application today. The board can approve it, but if any concerns arise with, the elements of the site, of the current site plan, or the materiality of what's on the site, just as a reminder, the board always has the option to approve the site plan with specific conditions, or to table the application if they feel that, more overarching updates need to be made to the site, by which they could just come back with an updated plan. So just to kind of clarify that a little bit further.
Okay, thank you.
And Belkis, this may be more of a question for Adam or for the applicant, but there's a change in the agenda, and last month we had talked about maybe a two-step process of approving what's there, but then coming back for a revised plan. Understanding what the long-term plan is would help understand why how or what we're approving.
Yeah, I can definitely speak to that. So what we discussed internally as staff is it's actually atypical for an applicant to bring two applications for the same thing for the same site in the same month, because what happens is technically the board could approve both items, and then at that point the applicant can do either or. So if you have, two signs for the same building and the board approves both signs for both addresses, they can pick which sign they would prefer and just go about that one. So just because something's approved doesn't mean that it'll actually be built. And so because of that, we wanted to avoid any confusion of thinking that one application relied on the other. And we just asked the applicant if we requested that the applicant select one application that they would like action to be taken on, and just focus on that. And then again, if the board has any concerns with what's on the site today being approved, indefinitely, then the application can be tabled. They can make overarching updates, and then that can come back for review and a potential approval. Or the board can layer specific conditions, such as to approve it, but they need X type of fencing or X type of gravel, just as an example. But really, it's our practice to just have one application per site on each agenda, which is why you saw that other item go away.
So does that mean they could come next month with the plan that was, I'll call it, upgraded from this, with the larger amphitheater, the larger screen, the more upgraded, and that just gives them more time to come do that? Or is that off the table from what you understand? Just trying to understand are we looking at this as this is...
All of it's on the table, but if the board isn't comfortable with what's in front of them today being approved indefinitely, then the board could either table this application so they could come back with an application that addresses any concerns, or specific conditions can be applied to an approval today. But, we all saw like a conceptual idea of what land grant has in mind last month. So if the board wanted to explore what that idea could look like, then this application could be tabled, and they could come next month with, maybe something more reminiscent of what we saw last month. So that type of plan could be focused on and voted on and explored. But right now, what we have in front of us is the applicant requesting to approve what is existing, which is in front of you indefinitely, or what is like, you know, a regular approval.
So let's make one other thing clear here. Their current temporary approval is good until May of next year, correct? So
correct, yeah.
So we're not under any particular time pressure with respect to their current approval expiring.
Exactly. So again, if the board was concerned with approving this indefinitely, then again, it's not like they have to go out there tomorrow and take out what's there. It's good until May of next year. So there's time for something like this, if there was concern, to be tabled and then to have them come back with something, you know, maybe more robust, if that's what the board's looking for. I don't know, but you all can comment to that, but I'm just giving out scenarios and options.
Okay. Any other questions for staff?
Yes, I had one. This is TJ. I think where I thought we were at last month and where at least I'm at personally is I think I currently don't have any problem with the usage being approved for indefinite. My concern is that the quality and level of installations were done and approved based on temporary, from a cost saving standpoint, and for not breaking the bank with the temporary build out, which we were all on board with. And I think where we're skirting around the issue is putting the cart before the horse, and we don't want to approve currently what is sitting in front of us indefinitely without the approval or at least agreeance of the updating and improvement for the future. So is there a possibility of us granting the usage indefinitely with a combination of saying that the structures and build out will have to be updated by May of 2021? Is that
I'm going to chime in on that one because if we get to we as Belkis said at the beginning, we could approve this with conditions, but given that we have until May of next year, if the conditions are so extensive as to require basically like really extensive changes to the site, which I think is what you're envisioning, TJ, then we're probably better off tabling this application and asking the applicant to come back with a unified application for permanent approval of certain site improvements that they propose to make in a site plan presented to us. All right. In other words, we would permanently approve something concrete that is in fact permanent in our eyes. So, you know, if that's where the board wants to go, that's probably the right way to do that. Now, having said that, I think we're all talking and not giving the applicant a fair shot here. We're veering out of questions for staff and into comments. So let me allow the applicant to have the floor here, and we can talk to the applicant about this. So let's see. Get my applicants up here. Mr. Keener, is there anyone else besides Ryan Keener here?
Yes, Adam is here as well.
Okay, very good. Gentlemen, I'm going to swear you in now. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay, and Ryan?
Yes, to Ryan as well, yes.
Yes, Adam, yes, to Ryan. I think we got both of us. I think we said it at the same time.
Yeah, we're talking
there we go. Good deal. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. I think you've heard what we've had to say so far. So With that, the floor is yours.
Sure. So our intention is to still come back for the future improvements because we were limited to one application at this in this meeting. And because of the last time that we spoke, there was the board had a kind of consensus that they would approve a permanent approval for the existing conditions. So that's what we're asking for here. Our intention is to come back for a larger site improvement, but there are some things that we need to that we felt that we needed to work out. We had applied for that only as a conceptual review, so not necessarily to go to a vote. There's some things that we need to work through, such as the site and zoning, before we come back, before we get the actual vote.
Yeah, and I think this is Adam to chime in on that. Again, as Ryan said, our feedback at the end of last meeting was split this into two applications, and we would approve the current conditions as is, and then come back with the more details because there was a lot of questions on the finishes and some of the other things. And as I mentioned even last meeting, there were also a lot of concerns about the stage and the use of that. And I think that's something that we would even want to explore a lot deeper in the conceptual application we initially had sent for this meeting. Didn't even include the stage because I think I even mentioned we don't even know when and if we'd ever allowed to have large events that would warrant putting a permanent stage at this point. So that I think goes into, if we were to get that approved, we would be concerned about, does it even make sense to build something like that if you can't have large scale events anymore? So that's where we felt that on the timing and the feedback we had from the board last week or last month to approach this. Again, as we talked as kind of the feedback and some of the things we talked about last month was this is, as we look at this significant investment, this is a kind of chicken and the eggs scenario of it's difficult for us to commit to a large investment if we do not have the approval, and it's difficult for us to come to we have a long-term agreement on the table, but until I know that at the minimum the current use is able to continue, to come to an agreement with the landowner also puts us in a precarious position. So I think a lot of it was just based on the feedback we had last month, of approaching it with the existing conditions.
Okay.
This is Belkis. If I could just talk to a couple points really quick. So in terms of the land use, with the use with live entertainment venue, that use is allowed by code. So there's never going to be an issue with the use of the site. That's something that's always allowed. And in terms of the approval is, for the current conditions is guaranteed through May of next year. So if the applicants are interested in coming back next month even with a more robust plan as they stated, and kind of as we saw a little bit last month, those things are in place. And so if this were to be tabled because of concerns over the materials that are there right now, that's something that could happen, and they could come back next month with their full robust site plan with those upgraded materials and things like that we kind of saw last month. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask the board. Right now, the applicant is asking for permanent approval of what currently exists. Is the board interested in granting approval of what currently exists conceptually, but with the condition that they return to the board for approval of permanent of permanent materials in all aspects of the improvement? This does seem to be, to me, it seems to be sweeping enough that we would have a hard time, even like the approval we would give would be fairly empty because it would require so much for them to return. But I'll leave that up to the rest of the board to comment on.
Well, I think the approval would be for the indefinite usage and not the materials in the plan that has been previously approved. I think, and I would have no problem approving the indefinite usage as it has been approved on a temporary basis and extending that indefinitely. And I think that would give, Adam, would that give you enough, solidarity to move forward with your lease agreements and your planning, with the understanding that you'll have the usage on those parcels as you currently have them indefinitely?
Before you answer that, I want to ask Belkis, what an approval of strictly the current use, is that something that we can even do?
You can approve the use. The parking would just be tied to that. So you would approve the use with the development standard modification of 264 space reduction.
Okay.
So we could do that today, or another option is the board could approve the use and parking reduction on the condition that the applicant return to the board for review of site plan, landscaping, and materials. That way, the applicant knows 100% that the use is approved indefinitely. It's just they need to come back to have, to dot the I's and cross the T's of the site. So those are the two options.
And yeah, the latter one sounds rather inviting, in my opinion.
This is Bart.
It's a little bit more clear as to
Yeah.
What the roadmap is, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. Board?
If they don't follow through, does that make the approval void then?
After May of 2021?
Oh, well, so what's currently there expires in May of 2021. So, I mean.
So if we approve it with a condition and they, for some reason, don't come back to upgrade to permanent status and permanent site plan before the end of May 2021, would their approval expire?
I'd say almost certainly yes. I mean, it's a conditional approval. Therefore, they don't meet the conditions, they don't get the approval.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So basically, it's a conditional approval until May of 2021, when they're
yes.
Right. Okay.
I guess I'm gonna maybe shoot myself in the foot here, but if we just that sounds kind of there's no guarantee that the board would ever approve whatever we propose, right? So it seems like
but that is
right?
But that is an approval to us being okay with your usage being indefinite.
Right.
So that, I think, that should allow you to have comfort in negotiating a long-term lease or purchase.
So I guess my question is, I'm putting my honorary Juris Doctorate hat on here. So if there is a condition that we come back, is there a condition that the review board has to accept our proposal? And that puts us in a very precarious position if
Yeah,
what
this,
we, even if we proposed what we proposed last week and the board all of a sudden says, well, actually, we disagree with everything that we originally, felt like, the materialities, the lighting, or if there's going to be some, situations that, the board feels we should have X, but we can't financially do that, or doesn't make sense for the space. Does this just go on indefinitely? Are we creating a situation where this goes on indefinitely, that we just have to keep on coming back to the board to keep this approval alive and we're wasting?
Okay, I'll put on my real JD hat for a moment.
Yeah. So there we go.
And say, yeah, okay. I mean, we can grant the use approval and making it conditional upon upon some approving a more permanent arrangement. And yes, you and I, or you and the board, could never agree. We could in theory never agree on what those materials would look like. And in May of 2021, you'd be out of luck. Okay, absolutely true. I think.
Well, but I think
you have to take it as an article of faith that based upon your previous discussions with us, that the board is not interested in messing with your business, and that there's reasonable people on the board. But if I were your attorney, I'd say, yeah, of course there's a risk.
I think the general palette of materials that exists as a temporary use are great as a temporary use. I don't think anyone's asking for granite and marble in a permanent use. I mean, it can still be wood. It's going to be something that stands up a little better over time. I think the use I wholeheartedly support, and I don't think materially we're asking for gigantic upgrades over temporary, but it would be really difficult for me to support in the current condition of a temporary use space, supporting that indefinitely, forever. Some of that material is going to break down in 3 years. It's not going to look good. So
I would also agree to that. For us as a business to continue that way, it's not in our best interest, but it's also not in my best interest as a business to then enter into additional long-term agreements with there's no guarantee, and I don't know what the current board supports that, but does that current board exist in May? I don't know the terms. This is what if it's approved. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Gentlemen. Okay. So having stated your case, okay, as an attorney, I'm now going to state the board's case. If we grant you a permanent use permit without conditions, okay, we would be relying upon your good faith to come back to us with upgrades, whereas you could simply continue with the conditions that are on the premises now permanently, if we grant that sort of condition. And as a board, I don't think anyone's inclined to do that. I think the best we're going to get to here is a middle ground where we put in the record that, yes, we grant you this use. Nobody wants to see you not have this use, but in order for that grant to be permanent, you've got to come back to us with a proper site plan and materials. Board, I'm going to leave that back up to you guys again.
I'd like to comment.
Go ahead, Judy.
I think we need to pay attention to the fact we live in a capitalist economy where if a business doesn't take care of their property, they go out of business, and then someone else will be here with a different application. This seems more difficult than what's going on in Congress right now.
one, Bill, well, and I don't know if this is possible, and I don't know the board's appetite for this. But one of the things that I heard Adam say, and even Ryan say, part of the questioning is what the post-COVID world looks like, and whether there's a stage, whether there's all of this, and we can look here today and say that May of 21 is a year out. I'm not sure we're going to know everything by then. Is there the possibility to say in its current state, and whether we're willing to extend it by a year, that gives a little bit more time to figure out that plan, and whether that helps at all to say, hey, we're not going to be under the belt for, or under the gun for May of 21. But, by May of 22, the world hopefully is more clear and a clear plan. And we're saying, by then it gives you more time to work stuff out and come to a conclusion with the board. That would be one middle ground that I could think of, but I don't know everyone else's feeling or whether that's a possibility.
Okay, Belkis.
I'd like to speak to that, Brian. This is Belkis. Our division no longer does temporary approvals, which would include extending this for one more year. We don't do that anymore. It's just not a best practice. So that's not something that's on the table.
That's a quick answer.
When you say you don't do that, does that mean that it is no longer a legal option? Or is it just something you discourage?
It's something that we discourage and don't support. And that's just because it's not something that's easily trackable. And if something is approved on a temporary basis, once something's built, it's very hard or almost impossible to undo it, right? So that's why we don't advocate for it or suggest it. I don't know what the legalities are, to be honest, but I know that as a division, it's not something that we support or encourage.
So new applications, I would understand that, Belkis, but what about an existing application, an existing approval? Just because I really like Ryan's middle ground of giving land grant a little more time. I have full confidence that Ryan Keener and Mode can do something super, but they need some time. And Belkis, I know we've talked about this, but yeah, these are very unusual circumstances. We have an existing temporary use, which heaven knows we did it, for whatever reason. 3 years ago we did it. It's there. It exists. If this were any other time other than COVID-19, I would completely support the city's position. However, I do understand the unique uncertainty that we have right now, where the applicant is looking at their business and having no darn idea what it's going to look like in the next year until this, until the crisis passes. So, unless it's illegal for us to extend this by a year, I think we may want to consider it as a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think it's illegal at all. No, I'm just saying that that's where our division stands, and that's, if our administrator Mark Dravilis was leading in my spot, he would say the same thing. But again, as a board, you all can make that call, and that's your call to make. But I'm gonna stay planted with what our division requests.
Understood.
So, yeah.
Discussion. First of all, applicant, would that be helpful to you, applicant?
I think it could be helpful. I think that was one of our also our concerns if we had an approval and needed to start the clock on construction. I think as I've stated through last time, and I think every time we've come aboard, that we want to continue to reinvest, and it doesn't make sense for us. I mean, we took what was an empty lot with a dilapidated fence, and sure, our temporary stuff isn't the greatest, but we're doing our best to try to take and continue to reinvest into Franklinton. So if that's what it takes to continue to show that we're going to continue to act in good faith and do so. My biggest concern is, we can say that it's May, but we had this application originally in for the March meeting that got canceled, and it's now almost July. So that temporary approval keeps creeping up, and who knows what's going to happen. And without this right now, Land Grant Brewing probably would not exist in Franklinton anymore. So it is something that we, again, want to stay here and continue to reinvest in the community. But what concerns me is, what we've done. And, when we started out, we put in the parking lot. I don't think anyone else, besides the larger Casto, put in a garage. None of the other smaller businesses that came in here did any of that. And now we're faced with a large parking, that increased to over 200 spots because of not owning this parcel, puts us in a real difficult position to see if we can continue with this as part of our business. So with this coming up in what's now 10 months, seems like a lot of time, but that's going to be here before we know it. And that really concerns me because as we're preparing for 2021 and beyond, I need to know if this is a viable option for the future or not. It's not like Ryan and Mode Architects are just going to flip a switch and have an entire design that can be approved in the next month or so that has all the materialities that folks are looking for, because it's something that is not going to be a temporary thing that a few of us put together over a 2-month time period in building if we're looking to be here for the long haul. So it's kind of again, I know it's a difficult position, but that is the reality of why we came when we did. And we used the feedback from the board. I mean, the feedback last month was, if we separated it out, the board would fully support a long-term approval, and then we would come back. So if that has to be the way that we look at it, that's fine. We again didn't want to put the cart before the horse and do a full design on materialities and what this could look like without actually knowing if we were going to have that long-term approval. So we're just trying to follow the direction that we were given.
And this is Ryan. I guess the way I look at it is that what we're approving in this would be the use going forward, and whether that use means making some materiality changes to what's there so that it is permanent and there's a lesser investment, but there's upgrades that are made to the current plan, or whether the upgrade is a whole new site plan similar to what we saw last month. That's what my idea of bringing the extra year would allow you to decide which one of those paths you want to go down. Because I think where we sit today, no one on the board is willing to say we're willing to leave it as it is right now in perpetuity. And so we need to have some teeth to come back that says if we're approving this, we want some changes made. It may not look at all what was like last month. It may mean, I don't know, $10,000 of upgrades to certain items and say, yep, that's good enough. You don't need the stage. You don't need all this. But, and if that's something that, in my mind, if you wanted to bring that back next month and said, hey, here's our upgrades that we would do to make this in perpetuity, I would be open to that too. I was just trying to provide an option that you didn't have to make any decisions today, next month, or the following month. You had some more time.
Yeah,
This is Belkis again. I do want to point out that, again, there's 10 months between now and May of next year, and some of you saw what they presented last month. Some of you got a sneak peek of the conceptual plan that was posted before the agenda was updated. So I do feel like land grant has genuine, plans in place and ideas of what types of materials they wanted to use. And if this were approved with a condition today, it could be as simple as approving it on the condition that the fencing be cedar and the gravel be a crushed limestone. It could be something as simple as that, so that way they don't even make crazy, really think, they have time to think about what programming they want to do, but there's still some detail on how to upgrade their site for the next 10 years or indefinitely. But that's just one avenue that could avoid adding on another temporary approval.
Somebody really doesn't want a temporary approval here.
I'm going to stand my ground.
This is TJ. If Adam, if an extension of the current temporary works for you, I would much prefer that and that option than approving something half complete and just saying, upgrade the fence to cedar and crushed limestone, because I don't think anyone on the board doesn't trust you guys to, from a business standpoint and from a capitalist standpoint, Judy. Yes, you're going to do what's best for your clients and your company. But you also have shown you're a part of Columbus and you've always done right by Columbus and Franklinton, and the amount of investment you've put into a 2 or 3 year temporary beer garden is substantial, even though it is what it is currently. You've put in quite a bit of money to it. I don't think there's anybody that doubts what your long-term goals will be. If giving you an extra year in May 2022, although Belkis doesn't want to do it, I think the board is on board with extending that, and that gives you a full 22 months to figure out what you want to do. And if you want to come to us once in 5 months and say, here's my semi-permanent upgrades, and then we'd like to come back again in a year and talk about a stage and some other things, I think we are willing to work with you on that. I don't want to hamper your long-term lease agreements and your future planning by just tabling this, but I also strongly agree with the rest of the board members that where it is currently, I think Bill said it perfectly, we are not okay with just approving this in perpetuity as is.
Okay, so I think you've probably stated a consensus position at this point. So what I would say is that we would want to do a two-pronged motion here, which would be to actually approve the application as submitted with the condition that the applicant return with permanent.
Could I interrupt, Bill?
Go right ahead.
The way I'm reading it is that the board would approve the application on the condition that the approval be limited to May of 2022, and that the ground cover would remain crushed gravel and Astroturf, and that's just, since it's temporary. I think that would be my recommended or suggested motion. So that way you have the time limit in there, and then you also address the temporality of the ground cover.
But Belkis, if they wanted to change that in the interim from what it is now, they'd have to come back to us. That's true. By specifically stating those things, if they change, then they'd have to come back to us. Upgrades. Yeah. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I just wanted to be clear in the motion that open.
Okay, well, first of all, applicant, as stated, does that help you?
Yeah, I think so. It's
You obviously have the sense of the board that all of us want to see this use continue. Okay, and I don't think that's going to change. I think you also get a sense from the board that nobody wants to run you out of business by wanting marble, marble, teak wood and whatnot being used there.
And this video's on YouTube, so it'll live in infamy and everyone will know what we said. So,
Sure.
So be it.
Yeah, I guess, and this is kind of going back to, I think, what maybe you proposed, Bill, is that is it the approval that we come back and kind of marrying what Ryan said, taking the current conditions and making and presenting a more permanent finishes on the current conditions, as opposed to because if that's the concern of why, again, we wouldn't have the permanency, because the treated pine on the exterior doesn't appear, or the larger gravel is the issue. I guess that's kind of my concern, is it's kind of where Ryan was saying, if this is if it was more permanent, or the fence that we talked about last year, if it is taking what is there and making it more permanent, as opposed to because that again, I hear what you all are saying, but I don't know what that necessarily means. Is that if it's helpful to say it's approved and we come back and say everything that's existing, or what, and what does that mean? Are the benches made out of, if we kept the benches that are made out of treated pine that isn't exposed to the exterior, is that an issue versus the fence that is along Town Street, or if it's painted? So those are, I don't, it's so ambiguous. I think we would need guidance on that, and maybe I'm looking too much.
I think you're reading too much into it, and I would say you create a site plan that you want permanently for the future.
Yeah.
And we'll probably nitpick the shit out of it, and you'll come back the second time and we'll approve it. That is the kind of the MO for most items and things, that if Kim feels strongly about something, he'll stand up and argue for it. But ultimately it's yours. It's assuming to be your site plan for the future. Create the site plan that you want for the permanent future, and we'll address those items at that point. I don't think you want to spend money to upgrade what is currently there just to appease us for the future, if that's not what your long-term site plan goals are.
TJ, I was just going to say the same thing. Absolutely.
No, I appreciate that.
I'm uncomfortable with that. I thought we were headed in a good direction. I thought the plan that you presented, the conceptual plan, was headed in the right direction. There was a few things that we gave you comments on, but I'm sensing now that you're backing off of that plan.
No, I'm backing off of having to start that in 6 months or however that is, and that makes me very nervous right now when we're faced with potentially closures again this fall.
Mm-hmm. So Belkis, when we approve a plan, how long does the applicant have to implement that plan?
Yeah, so how it works is when I issue a certificate of approval after they submit their construction drawings to me, that certificate of approval is good for 1 year. And so within that 1 year period, they have to go in and get their permit. But once they get a permit, they have it. And I think the permit is good for a year after that.
Correct, yes.
But once they have the permit, they don't have to build it. It just means that they're allowed to.
Right. So if I would much rather you come back with that plan and adopting some of the comments that we gave you and approve a plan like that seems to be going in the right direction in terms of a long-term plan.
But I guess my question for Belkis, but in that scenario, doesn't the temporary approval still expire in May of 21? And there has to be,
Yeah,
they
it
would
does.
have to shut down in May of 21, right?
But we're talking about doing this over the next couple of meetings, right? That's where TJ was going. You come in
I'm
back.
saying
Yeah.
even with that approved, and I'm not, Belkis, you would know more, is that you say we approve that in October. I'm just making up a month. They then come May of 2020, they can't continue to operate under that temporary approval without having building permit or done anything like that from a legal
Correct.
standpoint.
But we're giving
So-
them the long-term approval with the adoption of that plan, right?
An extra year,
Okay.
right?
So let's say, I think I know where Ryan's going with this, Kim. So let's say they come back a month from now, or even say 3 months from now, and we approve a permanent plan that they're not ready to build until say July of next year. They would have a real problem between May and July because their temporary approval of what exists now.
But they wouldn't, because we've approved it full time and they've got a COA for the new items, whether they've started construction or not. It would still be usable and still be approved. It would just, they would not have started to
because I'm not sure it works that way, because then you would just get you get approval and you could buy out those 2 years and never do anything on your current site there. So I'm not, and maybe that's a question for Belkis.
Yeah.
So let's give them another year on the temporary until May of 2022 and not beat this horse too much longer.
I like the way you think, TJ.
Yeah, my impression is that we want to give them another year of temporary and ask them to return
At their pleasure.
Return at their pleasure for permanent approval, realizing that the next time they come back, they need to actually be ready to build this thing by May of 2022.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, I see that too. Yeah.
Adam, how does that sound?
No, that makes 100%. You'll probably see us next month anyway, but again, if we shut down,
We'll take the time pressure off.
I didn't think everything was going to shut down in March, but it did. So this is the reality that
we'll take the time pressure off, but the sooner you come back, the better it's going to be for everyone.
You'll probably see us the next 3 or 4 months in a row. So I mean,
look forward to it.
Yeah.
So Bill,
Okay.
correct me if there's anything wrong here, but I propose to approve the submittal as noted, the adjustment of the parking spaces for a permanent basis and extend the temporary use and site plan for an additional year until May of 2022, at which time they will need to come back in front of the board to review and approve a final and permanent site plan.
No, make it simpler than that.
So could I?
I think all we're doing right now is we are extending the. We're going to make a motion to extend the temporary certificate of appropriateness for the existing use from May of 2021 to May of 2022, and we've already kind of
Second that.
Yes.
Everyone, okay, so am I hearing that the board is approving the application on the condition that the approval be limited to May of 2022?
Yeah, I suppose it's a different way of putting it. It does the same thing.
Okay. And so, so TJ motioned and Judy seconded?
I think Bill motioned, didn't he?
No, I don't care.
Okay. Okay. All right. So, Dr. Bach.
Approve.
Okay. Mr. Fergus.
Approve.